Welcome back to another episode of 33.3 WREC. I'm the innkeeper, Ben. Along with me again, as always, we got Joe. Joe, happy to be here. I really think the first episode went well. I think that it was
I think it
enjoyable.
was
It was
very well
enjoyable for
received.
me.
Yes, I really enjoyed doing it too. That was a lot of fun. I'm happy that we got renewed for a second episode. Honestly,
So yeah, after we
I could
had
talk about music for days. So I mean, really happy to
yeah
keep
our
doing this.
our first episode, we kind of went kind of how I expected it to. Honestly, I with our two different tastes in music. You went with Pink Floyd. I went with Cody Jinks, another country guy out of Texas. And this week, kind of in the same vein, you have the Rolling Stones 1978 album, Some Girls, and then you mentioned that you like the guys like Waylon Jennings and like that era of country music. So I decided to roll with Sturgill Simpson's 2014 album, Metamodern Sounds in Country Music, which is Sturgill's a guy who's often compared to Waylon, so I'm excited to hear what you had to think about that. But I guess we'll kick it off with you with Some Girls right at the top.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, I stayed in the 20th century. You're in the 21st century. So I might hop into the 21st century these next couple episodes. I don't know, depending on which albums I've been digging lately. But Some Girls, I've been in kind of a bit of a Rolling Stones kick lately. It wasn't until I was at a buddy's house like the weekend before Christmas, and we were in his basement playing billiards, like pool, and we were listening to Some Girls on vinyl. Like we listened to it front to back, and that's when I really like got into the Rolling Stones kick, was like after that night. And like this is like honestly like such a great album. Four songs off this album was on the Billboard's Hot 100 chart when this was released. So like right away, it's just got some hits on it. Yeah, it was released in June 9th, 1978. The Stones started recording this in October of 77, and they finished recording in March of 78, around that area. And they released Miss You, Some Girls, Beast of Burden, and Shattered as singles prior to this album coming out. And all four, Miss You, Beast of Burden, and Shattered were the ones that made it to the Hot 100 chart. But this album was kind of inspired by the New York scene of what was going on in New York at the time when the Stones were there, and it's got a bit of a disco hint to it.
I have that written because I mean, obviously in the 70s, I mean, music was shifting more and more towards disco and almost
Punk
like,
a little bit.
yeah, I was going to say this album kind of came off as the Stones shifting towards punk in a way. I felt like it listening through.
Yeah, like my like, first thing that came to my mind listening to it, it's like, and I was like reading through, like doing some research. It's like their response to this basically was like his disco and punk was kind of starting to evolve a lot more, especially punk more in London actually at the time was really starting to take over in like London and the UK, and then like just a bit in New York City and like East Coast in the US. And I first thing that came to my mind was like Mick Jagger's response to like all that happening was basically like, if you can't beat them, join them. Like, you know, let's just make a little dance album a little bit. And like that's the vibes I got from Miss You, Beast of Burden, and like Shattered. Like all great songs, honestly. Like and they were really happy with the way this came out. And it's an iconic album cover too, actually. I got the vinyl sitting right here. Iconic album cover with mostly the Stones faces on it, covering a bunch of different women at the time. And they were actually sued by a couple pretty popular actresses and models for using their faces actually on the album. Marilyn Monroe's estate tried suing, Judy Garland's daughter tried suing, and Lucille Ball tried suing, and they all eventually settled, and they got some money out of it. So like for using their faces. And one thing I did learn, actually, George Harrison's on the cover of that album too, actually.
Is he?
Yeah, so pointed out, he's this face right here. I did not know that until this week when I was looking through it, and they just snuck that in one way or another. So that's actually pretty interesting, pretty cool fun fact. But yeah, like this album starts off with Miss You right at the beginning, and right away you just get like a little bit of a disco like dance vibe to it. And
Yeah, it's a song that regardless of when it comes on, time of day, whatever mood you're in, it's a song you're gonna be constantly bobbing your head to, regardless
yeah.
of what the situation is. It's a feel good song.
Yeah, and the song's actually about how like Mick Jagger was having an affair with
Yeah,
Texas model Jerry
yeah.
Hall, and how he misses like fooling around with her before they eventually got married,
Mhm.
like sometime later. So that's actually pretty funny. And like, yeah, it's just kind of this album kind of shows just like how like they were basically like kind of party animals a little bit. You know, they were fooling around with like a whole bunch of
Mhm.
stuff. So it's kind of funny in that regards. Yeah, I Miss You is like I want to say it's not my favorite song off the album. It's definitely like top three, but
Mhm.
great song altogether. Anything you'd have to say about it?
No, I mean, I think you kinda hit it, but then, like, just moving on to, the next song, "When the Whip Comes Down."
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
when I was I mean, it's a song I've listened to before, but, like, as, like, I'm doing, my prep work, getting ready for the show, when you tell me which album you wanna do, I have my notes out, I'm reading through the lyrics as I'm listening to all the songs. I mean, this song is straight. I kind of interpret it right. Obviously, it's a song about a gay guy who I kind of took it as like he was a prostitute in a way, moving from LA to New York to become a prostitute in a way, kind of. But
yeah,
also, like you kind of touched on it a little bit, talking about like how this was like the Stones moving towards being a punk band. Like, if you really wanted to like stretch the envelope a little bit and go with maybe this is their song coming out as a punk band. That's kind of a vibe almost I got in a weird way.
yeah. They're really like pushing the limits on it. Like they really
Yeah,
wanted to try and
yeah.
do it, and like like that's like the first thing I had in my notes too. It's like going into punk rock. Like when the whip comes down, it's like that
Mhm.
and Shattered. Really, like to me, like sounds
Yeah.
like them trying to move into that punk rock sound.
Mhm.
And I chat and when the whip comes down too, like one great song. It's stuff simple two chord progression. Really, it's just them
Yep.
like going from A to D, like those two chords, the entire song, and like
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that at all. Like, I love that actually. It's just a simple little song. Yeah, and again, yeah, it's about like a gay guy kind of wanting to become a prostitute or whatnot. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it kinda open to your own interpretation, but,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
just you
Yeah,
can infer, yeah, absolutely. And then,
and
after
then
that, obviously, you had "Just My Imagination," which is a Temptations cover, which one of their most popular songs. I mean, almost in a way, moving towards the disco, which the Temptations had some disco music at the time. I just found that kinda interesting. Not really much to add to that other than I found it interesting that they would roll with a cover to kind of kick off the second half of the album.
yeah. Yeah, and then I right after that song too, it goes into I believe Faraway Eyes, if I'm correct.
I believe
Uh
it is Lies.
Lies, and then Faraway Eyes,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm. Yep.
Faraway Eyes is that's their country type of song
Yep.
actually, and like
Mhm.
Mick Jagger, like he's not really singing it, he's more or less like
Just
he's more or
speaking
less
almost.
talking,
Yeah.
yeah, like speaking Elmo, which I like, and I really like that song. That's like another song I love off the album.
Mhm.
Just like singing about California, really. Like he's talking about Bakersfield, California, whatnot, like everything going out there, and like I can't remember like the woman he's exactly singing about, but he's
Mhm.
saying like it's just he kind of like a little country love song in a way,
No,
which I really
absolutely. Yeah,
like.
it was a very, very nice change of pace on the album, obviously. And in my
Yeah,
notes, I wrote strong Western vibes, and I kind of felt like that was a song you could be humming to yourself, hearing it in your head when you're on a horseback looking over like a valley and a mountain. I mean, obviously
yeah, right.
not
Yeah,
actually,
looking at
but
the
like that's a
sunset
song.
going over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you could very well see that that song in a movie in that type of
yeah.
setting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then after that, you'd go into Respectful, Before They Make Me Run, and then
Mhm.
like one of probably the most popular song off the album after that would be Beast of Burden.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the second to last song. And Beast of Burden, like that song's just basically a whole metaphor. And like Beast of Burden, like people don't know, like a beast of burden is a working animal. Like it's like
Mhm.
a horse that's like a horse carriage type animal, like a
Yeah.
horse that plows the fields or, you know,
Mhm.
moves stuff, whatever. And it's kind of like Mick Jagger singing about like he doesn't want to be in an abusive relationship with whoever
Mhm.
he was with at the time. And like where like in the chorus, like, am I hard enough? Am I rough enough? Like, I'm not too blind to see. Like, that's kind of what he's singing
Mhm.
about. Like, he's asking, like, in that, he's like asking his lover, like, you know, am I doing everything right in this relationship?
Mhm.
And then, he kind of like, then later in the song, it's like, goes into like, you can put me out on the street, put me out of my misery. Like he's kind of saying, I don't want to be in this, you
Mhm.
know, what he's basically singing about. And like, that's great song off the album too.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's obviously Beast of Burden. When you think of the Rolling Stones, I would say that's one of the first few songs
One of the
people
first songs
often
you'd
think
probably
of. Yeah.
think of,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And then the album ends with Shattered, which is by far probably my top two favorite Rolling Stones song. I just love the little like that little
Really?
punk sound. Yeah, it is my top two, probably. Yeah, top two favorite Rolling Stones song as of right now, as my tastes always change. But yeah, it's just that classic little punk sound that they were trying to
Mhm.
go for. And I can't think of the chord progression off the top of my head, but I think it's like
Mhm.
just a simple like 3 or 4 chord progression the entire song.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just got that punk sound. And this song basically describes like what it was like living in New York City at the time for
Yeah.
them. And it kind of makes fun of like their fashion, the New York City fashion industry too. Like you like probably hear them mention in a song like several times, like Seventh Avenue, like that's where
Mhm.
the fashion like district was in New York City, like at the time. I don't know if that still is or not, but at the time that's where it was.
Mhm.
And it also in the song also hints how New York's moving from a disco movement to the punk movement, and
Mhm.
where bars like CGBD, CGBG, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that's like a
Hey,
famous
if
punk.
yeah,
It's
I was gonna
famous
say
punk rock.
if I could help you out with that, I would help you out. But I am,
Yeah,
like I've said,
I'm embarrassed. I
absolutely
took
no
a rock and
knowledge.
roll class at my freshman year at college, and I remember like learning all about it. And I can't think of it off the top of my head, but like that was like a very famous punk rock, like almost alternative
Mhm.
type bar, like back in the
Mhm.
late '70s, early '80s, and like bands like Talking Heads. I'm pretty sure Patti Smith and
Mhm.
like a couple other notable bands like came out of
Yeah.
there. Velvet Underground, yeah, they all like came out of it, started
Mhm.
there pretty much, came out of there, and yeah, Shattered basically like hinting at the punk rock movement in New York City, moving from disco to punk rock, which is actually pretty interesting how they even noticed it at that time too.
Mhm. No, absolutely. Just, I mean, you. This whole album was an evolution for the Stones. I would say you could definitely feel the change, and which that's incredibly impressive considering I think this was their 14th album, if I'm off the
Yeah,
top
I
of my
think
head.
it's their
But
14th
regardless,
album. Because
well
this
over.
came
They've
right after, I believe, Exile on Main Street, if I'm
mhm.
correct. I really don't know, but like it was like a bit
But yeah,
later, like from what they had at the time, like considering
yeah, and
like 10 plus albums.
considering they started in the early '60s to
And like they
evolve,
already had
feel.
like a lot of hits at that time too.
Mhm.
Like at that
Yeah,
time, Sympathy for the Devil was out. I'm pretty sure
yeah,
like Let It Bleed album was out before
yeah,
this too. So they already had a bunch of hits at the time, and then they just come out and make this masterpiece. It's like, oh wow, like they still fucking have it, you know?
yeah, and it's just incredibly impressive. Just that whole era of music, to be completely honest with you, just not
Oh
the
yeah.
Stones, but just like you look at it from nowadays with the music that's put out, there's still good music made, but it's not like it was before.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm like a big 20th century music type of guy, and like I still love today's music. Like, you know, I still listen to bands like Cage the Elephant, who I will go on to say like they
Mhm.
are the modern day Rolling Stones. Like I'll say that. I think they really are. They put out that vibe to almost be the modern day Rolling Stones. That's what I would compare them to. Uh, but yeah, like 20th century music, like because at the time, 1978, I'm trying to think like clearly Led Zeppelin was like ruling the 70s at that time. The Grateful
Mhm.
Dead at the time was not studio like albums successful, but they were still going on like just
touring
a
wise,
bunch
yeah.
of tours. Yeah, touring like a lot, and they were really big. They were getting really big in the late 70s, and it wasn't until like the 80s when they really made a hit. But then yeah, I mean, it was like music wise at that time in the 70s, like was just
Mhm,
packed with a bunch of different artists. Like
mhm,
really, really good stuff came right from the 70s, really.
yeah. So, you've been talking how you're been heavily in the 20th century, and I've been in the 21st. So this next, moving into my album, Metamodern Sounds and Country Music by Sturgill Simpson. I kind of picked this one I mentioned because I know you mentioned you big fan of the Highwaymen, big fan Waylon Jennings, that era of country music. Sturgill is someone who's been constantly compared to Waylon. I would say just more for his voice more than anything. I would say, and it's actually pretty interesting because Sturgill doesn't mention Waylon Jennings ever as one of his influences, and I don't know if that's more so just Sturgill being Sturgill because I don't know how much you know about him, but he's a very, I would say, eclectic individual who kind of always likes to push the envelope, always likes to grow and change.
Yeah.
You listen to his albums. His first album, High Top Mountain, came out, I believe, a year before Metamodern Sounds, and it was a straight bluegrass album. It's a great album, but it was a straight bluegrass album. Then you move into Metamodern Sounds, and I
Completely
would call it
different.
almost
Like
like psychedelic country almost in a way.
yeah. So before I listened to this album, I never heard of Sturgill Simpson at all. Like I never heard of any of
Mhm,
this stuff. I knew who he was, and I've always wanted to check him out because I have heard good things about him.
mhm.
Just like through social media and whatnot. And like my first reaction from this album was basically like this was country music dipped in acid.
Mhm.
It was a psychedelic type country music, and it almost like kind of brought me back to like Grateful Dead's Working Man's Dead album
That's yep. Yep.
because it had that bluegrass type of like psychedelic sound to it, which I really liked. And like it was complete and like another thing, it was a completely different like country sound and like what most modern country sounds like, in my opinion. Like it was I really liked the album. It was like only like 35 minutes long too, which I
Yeah,
liked. It
it's
was
a
like a
short album, yeah.
short little, it wasn't like kind of shorter than I liked it. I like a good 45-minute album. I think that's like a
Mhm.
perfect length for an album. 35 minutes, so that's still like good length, honestly. I was listening to it while I was gaming or something the other day, and I was like, wow, this is like a really relaxed, like chill little country album. I really liked it. I mean, first song off the album, Turtles All the Way Down.
Mhm.
He's just sitting there singing about like
That's
doing drugs
yeah.
and whatnot. I'm just like
So,
already, I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm hooked.
So, basically that song is it's really based upon, this Indian philosophy where it's like basically there is no really exi I mean, what's a good way to put it? There's no basis for humans to exist almost, and that we're all kind of just like here floating on a rock around the sun. And
In the
I
middle of
mean, like
the
you said,
galaxy. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yep. And the song kind of brings you in a little bit, making you think it's gonna be like a religious song, but
a little
because they
bit. It
mentioned
kind of,
Buddha, they mentioned God, and there's religious undertones, but then
yeah,
it kind of gets going, and it's talking about how drugs can take you to spiritual those spiritual experiences.
yeah.
And the one line that'll always stick out to me in that song is, "Tell me how you make illegal something that we all make in our brain. Some say
Mm-hmm.
you might go crazy, but then again, it might make you go sane."
Sane,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I
And
think
like the lyric that stuck out to me, like, there's a gateway in our minds that leads somewhere
mhm,
out there far beyond this plane. I was like, wow, like again, really great lyrics too. Like I said in the last, I'm a sucker for great lyrics.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just straight up talking about like kind of like Native Americans, like kind of believe in this type of stuff too. Same with like the Indians, like Indo-Chinese, like kind of
mhm,
what they, it's like all like the same, like kind of same beliefs almost, like using psychedelics and drugs to like really find who you are as a person and like to
mhm.
go I don't know how do I word it, like kind of like to go like beyond this plane, really, like as
Yep, no, absolutely,
Circle said, yeah,
absolutely.
like it's like, yeah, it was like a nice little song. And got that got that psychedelic sound to it too. That opening too. I love just the opening to the song. He just says the album title right away too, which I
Yeah, I know.
kind of like. Yeah, it's like so. Yeah, it was like it was a really good opener for an album. Actually, I really
Yeah,
liked
no,
it.
and a lot of the time with the albums, you kind of feel like that opening song really it's never one of the best songs on the album, I would say, but I always find that to be confusing because especially in the streaming era where I'm flipping on an album, I'm clicking that first song and I'm really hoping and praying that that first song hooks me
Yeah,
in. And that's definitely a song that pulls you in. I mean, he talks about marijuana, LSD, psilocybin, and DMT. I mean, the guy, I mean, he's not hiding it. Which
no, yeah,
and Sturgill kind of blew up. I would say because of this album. I wouldn't even say he blew up, but he's very very well respected in the music industry. I would say, but he blew up more so because Joe Rogan fell in love with him, and
yeah.
he's been on a few Joe Rogan experience episodes, and he's just a very very down to earth guy, and he's very
Yeah,
open
chill
about
guy.
what
Like,
he
you can
likes, what
talk to
he
him about
doesn't like.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah. So then just moving on to the next song, Life is Sin. That's just more so just your classic country song, I would say. I mean, it
Yeah.
talks about, he talks about his substance abuse issues that have come
Things
as
he's
a
dealt
result
with in
of
his
a bad,
life, like
yeah,
all that. Like,
the substance abuse issues because of a woman, what she did to him. And I was thankful for her and the life of sin he lives because she gave him the gift of all the songs he's written. So, and one line that I kind of really like from that song, and just like in general in relation to Sturgill, is there's a line that says, "And the boys and me are still working on my sound." And I think that's just more so Sturgill saying, "You never know what you're going to get out of me. I'm always trying to constantly evolve." So I mean, like I said, High Top Mountain, his first album, was straight bluegrass. This was this weird psychedelic,
completely changed.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then moving on from there, his next album, Sailor's Guide to Earth, which came out in 2016, that actually won the Country Grammy for Album of the Year in 2016. It's like a jazz album. There's a bunch of horns on there.
Ooh,
It's
okay.
very, it's a very, very good. It's a great album. And then after that, his next album came out in 2019, Sound and Fury, and it was just straight rock and roll, like acid, like almost like a
Experimental
psychedelic
rock, would you
rock.
say?
Yes, yes, I would. He shifted and wrote and produced an anime movie based on the album.
That's actually
So
pretty
I mean,
sick.
like Sturgill pushes the envelope and he really doesn't care what you think. Like I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I didn't love Sound and Fury, but we're not here to talk about that album. But I just appreciate that he's willing to kind of push that envelope and
Yeah.
constantly try to evolve as an
Well, yeah,
artist.
that's what life's all about. It's about evolving. Like if you don't change, life is always gonna like stay the same. You want to keep changing. You want to keep evolving. You
Mm-hmm.
want to keep doing new stuff and challenging yourself. And that's what Sturgill's doing. Going from the bluegrass album first and going straight into that psychedelic country type sound. And then like the
Yeah.
jazz album after that, and then just going into like experimental, like acid rock almost. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's just changing. He wants to find something new. He wants to keep it interesting. And I respect that actually. Like that's actually pretty cool.
And that actually, you kind of bring it up, like what you just said. Moving into the next song, Living the Dream, it's pretty dark, but it's kind of almost like him saying, what's the point of living if you're not living the dream? And I think Sturgill's dream is making music and making different music, like standing
Yeah.
out from the crowd. And there's a line in there talking about like making a big pot of coffee without the cream. And I think it's just like, it's so simple because everyone knows, like, if you don't like black coffee, the thought of drinking black coffee is just repulsive to you. But like you're able to see that lyric and you're just like, oh damn, like
Yeah.
I mean, it's painful. If you're not waking up loving what you're doing every day, like what's the point?
Why are
And
you
there's a
doing
lyric
it?
in
Yeah.
there. Yeah. I mean, there's a lyric in there like talking about God smirking down at like the creation he's made despite you being unhappy or something along those lines. I forgot the exact lyric, but I just found that to be a pretty, it was a change of pace for sure from the album, but I've not one of my favorite songs on the album, but it's still a well written song nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then real quick, just moving to the next song, Voices. Um, it's another more so simple song, I would say, but there's a line in the
Simple, slow little
chorus.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a line in the chorus, basically, saying like a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a word ain't worth a dime, and we all know they'll go on take until the end of time. I mean,
That was probably my favorite
yeah,
lyric out of the whole album. I
I'm
had
I'm
that one
with you.
written
I
down
mean,
too. Yeah, that was the only thing I had on Voices was just that like simple little lyric is like truest statement I've ever heard. That was
no,
so like
yeah,
beautifully like well put by Sergal. I love that.
and
That
there's
was
yeah,
great.
and Sturgill has a way in his songs, in my opinion, where we all might come from different backgrounds. I mean, he's from the hills of Kentucky, like we're nowhere near that, but you can kind of you understand what he's saying, and anyone listening to that knows, like, well, no one cares what I really have to say in the end, in the grand scheme of things. So do it for you, almost that type of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, nothing really matters in the end, really. Like, that's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that's like my life model, really. Like I'm just gonna do whatever I can want to do, really,
Yeah.
because in the whole grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Like we're all gonna be forgotten like 200 years anyway.
Yep.
Like like
Yep.
just do whatever. Just kind of do whatever. It's
No, yeah,
not
it's
gonna
it's a
matter in
sad
the end.
reality, but when you come to terms with
It's
it, I
kind of it's
think
kind
you,
of fucked
yeah,
up once you like start to realize it. Then like once you get over that hump, it's just like oh like whatever,
it's like who gives a shit? Like move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know the Stones had a cover on their album. The only two songs on this album not written by Sturgill are these next two songs. They're two covers, Long White Line and The Promise. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, Long White Line, I you can listen to that song. It's technically a song about traveling, just riding around down the road. But you listen to that song, Long White Line, and the way that this album has kind of been going with those drug undertones, you can kind of let your imagination take you there. What Long White Line is actually talking about. I don't know if you got that vibe from that.
Yeah, a little bit. You got it's like it's up to your own interpretation, basically. That's like
Yeah.
another theme I got from this album. It's like it's kind of like your
Hmm.
own interpretation type of album.
Definitely. No, definitely. And then The Promise, just real quick, just to touch on it. I just liked how Sturgill showed off his voice on this one, because a lot of people who don't like Sturgill complain and say that he mumbles a lot of the time and he doesn't enunciate all of his words, which I can understand from time to time listening to some of his music. But on this song, kind of really showed off what he can do, and it's like, holy hell, this dude he can really sing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and the promise, yeah, like that was just like When in Rome wrote that song. So like it was just yeah, like
Hmm.
the other
Yeah.
cover. And yeah, it was just basically it's just like a little love song, just trying to make things work with whoever he's with in his relationship, It's so a neat little love song.
Yeah. So I mean, the next few songs kind of are just a couple quick ones, so we'll kind of gloss over them. Just a little light. There's just like a under 2 minute song, just a toe tapper. Nothing really to it, I would say. And then Just Let Go. That's another spiritual song, I would say. Letting
Hmm.
go of your ego. I more so from that one. And when you let it go, live your life in a more fulfilling manner, I would say, because no one really cares about you in the end. We've talked about that theme on this album a few times, I feel like. But the next song, It Ain't All Flowers. I would say that is the most experimental album song on the album. I'm not sure what you think about that. My dad's also a Sturgill fan, and my dad absolutely hates this song. And I
Yeah, I
just
can see that.
I can understand why you don't like it. I think it's an interesting song, definitely a little too long for my taste. It's like almost 7 minute song,
Yeah, no,
but
it is a bit long. It could have been shortened down,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
it was an
yeah.
experimental song though. Like, that's
No,
the thing
absolutely.
about it. And like uh I can like almost compare it to like a Beatles song almost. The one that it reminded me of was A Day in the Life, where like how the ending of that song is just basically like just that trippy little sound or whatever. And like that's basically what Sergo was doing here in the beginning and ending of this song. He was just adding like weird, like just weird effect,
That
like
weird
sound
g yeah,
effects.
yeah.
Yeah, and which I liked. I felt like I was tripping listening to that song. Like, it got me like that Beatles type vibe where I'm just like, what the
Mhm.
fuck are they doing? Oh yeah, what are they getting at here? But I liked it. It was really good. Could have been a bit shorter, but still, like
No,
it was a good song.
I have written that you could trim the fat on this one and be a much, much better song, but then again, it's dumb to complain about a song being too long on a 34-minute album,
Yeah, I
but,
mean,
um
yeah, right.
but so, one thing really quick about this I wanna touch on, and almost in my opinion, listening to it, when I, like, actually sit down and listen to this, like, with my ears wide open and not paying attention to anything else, I feel like it's almost a continuation of the song "Just Let Go" from the previous song on the album. There's a lyric in here like "Been a sin eater since the day I was born," and kind of like just going off of letting go of that ego and all the trouble that it's given you in the past and moving into "It Ain't All Flowers," just talking about how life it's not always going to be pretty and you got to do what you got to do. But it's a weird link that I've gotten as I've been listening to this album more and more. But I don't know. I don't. Who knows? Knowing
Yeah,
Sturgill,
no,
there's no
that was
relation
like
at all.
basically you basically got down. It's like he was like in like the lyrics like he's comparing like life to a rose, like like every rose has
Hmm.
its thorn, like that fucking
Yeah.
one song by
Poison. Yeah.
Poison.
Poison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's also what made me think of that song too. But no, yeah, like he was saying like, hey, like everything has a downside, whatever. But like, that's life, life ain't all
Hmm.
fucking sunshine and rainbows. Shout out Rocky
Yeah.
Balboa, like that's like the vibe I got from that song. And again,
Hmm.
like this is probably this and The Promise and the first song were probably my three favorite songs on the album.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. It's one of my favorites on the album for sure. And then lastly, just to gloss over it, Panball, which is actually considered a hidden track. I really have no idea what in God's name that really means, but it's considered a hidden track, and it's like very clearly about Sturgill just growing up, his upbringing, where he's from, and it was like one of those things. Like I said, we're not from Kentucky. We have no idea where Sturgill grew up, but you could still place yourself in his shoes in that song and just kind of let his imagery in that song kind of take you to where you need to go if you're actually like paying attention to it. It's a good song, but not one of my favorites on the album. I love this album personally. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you enjoyed it, which I'm very happy about that. And I hope
Yeah,
you continue to listen to Sturgill. Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed this album. I'm gonna check out his other albums now. Like you said, like he really went all over the place with like what he's produced and put out. I saw his Tiny Desk concert from NPR,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I think he did it right after he released this album. And even that was
Hmm.
good. And I got to see like he's a pretty damn good guitar player too. Like seeing the way he's
Yep.
like
He
moving up and
can.
down the fretboard. Like I was like, oh hell yeah,
Mhm.
dude. And I got to see he's a pretty laid back dude. Like
Yeah.
I really enjoyed him. I'm definitely gonna like check out his other stuff. Like I'm happy you put me on him.
Yeah. There's if you like watching him play the acoustic, there's some videos of him on YouTube with his electric guitar, and it blows my mind. He is incredible. He's probably right up there with Chris Stapleton in terms of being the best guitar player in country music right now. And there's actually a performance. He was on SNL, I think, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, when he was promoting "Sailor's Guide to Earth," the album he won the Grammy for, and he with his band, it was one of my favorite SNL performances I've ever seen in my entire life. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They played two songs at the top of the show, one at the top, one at the end, and he this is right leading up to the Grammys where Sturgill's he won the country album of the year at the Grammys, and his presentation for the award was not televised because he won the award over like
Oh
all the
really?
people like who are in Nashville and whatnot. And I like Sturgill a lot because he produces a ton of music. He produces just as much music as he makes, probably more so produces, and he's just in it for the love of the game. I mean, I'm looking forward to see what he does in the future. He also put out this year two big albums, Cutting Grass Volumes 1 and 2, and it's just straight bluegrass. And it's like bluegrass covers of some of his other songs, just some unreleased songs he's had in the past, and it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive what he's been able to do, and just probably what is it, 8 years since he's put out his first album. The following he's grown. It's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love seeing how artists progress, whatnot from when they begin to like what to like like where they are right now or like when they end. Like
Hmm.
I love seeing how artists progress and how their music changes through time. And
Yeah,
Sturgill's, yeah, it's like a great prime example of that. Whereas like he starts with bluegrass, he gets into that little like psychedelic type country, the jazz, and then goes into like rock and roll type album. I love
yeah,
seeing how artists progress. It's really cool how they're able to challenge themselves and like evolve and
yeah,
always try and find something new. Something I just, like always respect from like when artists do that.
yeah. Yeah, so speaking of something new, just to wrap up the show, Joe, we're just going to talk a little bit about some newer people we've been listening to lately. So if you want to kick us off with that, if not, I have a few names that I can mention real quick. Just a little conversation to wrap up the show.
Yeah, so I got a couple artists that I'm like kind of listen heavy to that are actually newer bands, 21st century type bands on like the 20th century albums that I've
Hmm.
been recommending on here. One band that I'm really big on, I mentioned in the last episode, is Twin Peaks. They're
Hmm.
straight out of Chicago. They have that. I would describe them as like a garage rock band, which like I'm really
Hmm.
big into, considering like I kind of do that myself a little bit. And an album I would recommend by them, two albums that were really big for them was Down in Heaven, which was
Hmm.
released in 2018, I believe, and then Wild Onion, which was released in 2014. Those are probably their two best albums. And they did just
Hmm.
release an album last year called Look Out Low. I thought it was really great. I don't think it was very well received by like at least most people I know weren't really
Hmm.
too crazy about it, but I still liked it nonetheless. But Down in Heaven and Wild Onion by Twin Peaks, those are two albums I highly recommend by them. And then another band that I'm going to mention that I also mentioned in the last show is the Grateful Dead. That's been like my
Yeah.
big kick ever since the pandemic started. Actually, I was stuck inside my house and I just started listening to a lot of like different Grateful Dead shows
Hmm.
and like their albums. They got two really good studio albums, American Beauty and Working Man is Dead, like I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
Those are like their most popular albums, but they're not a band that's known for their albums. They're a live band. Like you have to see this
No,
band in
absolutely.
person.
Absolutely.
And the thing that's just so like crazy and mind blowing about them, like, is no, they don't play a song the same way twice, and every show is different. Like you can see them for like a week straight. You can go to every show for
Hmm.
like a month, for like a whole month, and every show is going to be different. It's not going to be the same. They're going to start it out differently. They're going to play the songs different. Like true deadheads will tell you the difference between a Brown Eyed Women that was played on like 5877, and then 3 nights later how it's just a tad bit different, like how they played it 3 nights later. Like I swear to God, it's wild how they do that. And like if you want
Yeah,
to
no,
check
and
out their live shows, like I do recommend Cornell from 5877. That's considered their best show. And then there's another one from that same tour, that same spring tour, at Pinebrook Pines, Florida, or Pembroke Pines,
mhm,
Florida, 52277. And like those shows are very different from each other. Like they play like a lot of different songs, but like they
mhm,
still both rock. And like Grateful Dead from 77, 78, and then anything after that is like my favorite from the
mhm,
Dead. I particularly like 77, 78. Anything from the 80s and then early 90s is like also when they like were getting really hot and popular.
mhm.
Those are just my favorite like my favorite moments from the band is like just those years. But I mean, talk to like any true Deadhead like me, like they all had very different opinions and like, oh, like
Mhm.
no, they were better here, they were better
Yeah.
here. Like, and you can only have like specific conversations about the Dead with Deadhead. I've never like talked about a band like I do with the Grateful Dead with like fans of that band. You know, like they're just a
Oh,
truly, truly different
it's
band.
the most rabid fan base of any artist
Yeah,
band,
like and like
any type
you
of
go to their
on the planet.
shows
I've
too. Yeah. you go to their shows too, and you're just gonna meet so many great, interesting people. And like in our neighborhood, there's a Grateful Dead cover band called Caution, and
Mhm.
they play at a bar that I go to a lot, right by my house. And they would usually play like every last Friday of the month, and they would play at this bar.
Mhm.
And like I've been to a couple of their shows, and like their shows are not they're like the Dead too. Like their shows aren't the same.
Mhm.
They do a lot of things differently too. Like and like the most fun I ever had at a bar for like a small little band, like a neighborhood
Mhm.
band, you know, like they're and like even the fans for that band too are just like just remind me of the Dead. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bunch of interesting people. You'll be talking to like some guy who's like a lawyer on to your right, and then there's this next guy who's like a fucking construction worker, you know, like very, very interesting stuff. I really love the Dead. Like they're by far probably like I would go out to say they're like the best touring band that's like ever produced music, honestly. I would make
I
that
yeah.
argument.
I wouldn't argue with you on that whatsoever. I mean, just in terms of the number of live albums they have in their catalog, just to begin
Like
like
look through
with that.
Spotify, yeah, like
Yeah.
you
Yep.
just can go all over the place. And then there's another website actually, my buddy showed me. It's archive.org. And like they have a whole section on that website for like
Mhm.
Grateful Dead shows. And like the thing about the Dead
Wow.
too, they did not care about copyrights, like trademarks, all
Mhm.
that. You can do anything with their logos, whatnot. They like because it's just free advertising for it. That's just one thing
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, fuck it. Like, yeah, like that's free advertising for us. They would let fans go to the shows and they would have a whole section dedicated for fans to record their shows. And they would just give and like those fans would just give out that show like on a tape recorder or
Mhm.
whatnot. And like you can like trade just a bunch of different CDs too, like online, just whole bunch like there's like a lot of people who collect like all these shows too. It's just very interesting how like the Dead is like did what they did and like
Yeah.
no band has ever done what they did because the Grateful Dead are the only ones that do what they do, you know, like it's
No,
like
that's
I
a
would
great way
put
to
them in
put it
regards
because
like one of the best bands like do what they did.
mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So moving towards my couple artists I want to mention real quickly. There's this guy I've been listening to a good amount lately. He is undoubtedly one of the best guitar players on the planet right now. It's Marcus King. He's a younger guy. He's in his 20s. It's more of a southern rock, I would say. And
Yeah, he gives off that
what,
vibe.
what you do you listen to Mark? Have you listened to Marcus
I
King?
know a little bit. I'm not like I never really fully
No, yeah,
divulged into him, but like I've heard
yeah.
him here and there.
He's done some crazy things on the guitar, and there's another guy who I've been listening to. He's bluegrass, but what he's able to do with an acoustic guitar, you're talking about watching Sturgill earlier and it blowing your mind. This guy named Billy Strings from Kentucky, or no, he's from Michigan. Excuse me, he's from Michigan,
Hmm.
and he is undoubtedly the best acoustic guitar player I have ever seen touch a guitar. And him and Marcus King have done some collaborations together. There's some awesome videos of them on YouTube just playing with each other, and it blows my mind what those two are able to do. They're both in their 20s still, and future's bright for them. And what I really like about Billy Strings, he had a great album. His home album came out in 2019. It's a very, very good album. I just check it out. But his most popular song, what kind of like pushed him, propelled him upward a little bit more, I would say. I wouldn't call him huge by any stretch of the imagination, but his one song "Dust in a Baggie." It's his most popular song. It's a song basically about going to jail for a bag of coke, dust in a baggie, and he played that song when he got inducted into the Grand Ole Opry in front of all these old people who, I mean, if they're listening, they know what the song's about, but not going to see many people going into the Grand Ole Opry talking about getting arrested for doing coke.
Yeah, right. Like
I find that to be pretty funny. And then someone who I never in a million years thought that I would be listening to, who I like listened to their 2020 album earlier in the week. I've been listening to a ton of Machine Gun Kelly the past week. His
he's
tickets to
been
my
taking
down.
off. I feel like I've been seeing like I don't listen to
Mhm.
I don't really listen to him,
I
but like I've
I
been seeing a lot of stuff on him on social media. Like it seems like he's taking off.
I'll be completely honest, Joe. Before listening to his Tickets to My Downfall album, I could not have told you a single song by him. I couldn't tell you what he sounded like.
That's when
Nothing.
yeah, like I don't know
Someone
anything that he
someone
does.
someone recommended his the Tickets to My Downfall, which is like a pop punk album, and I do like 90s like punk. I listen to that a good amount. Um but it's a great album. I mean, I've been doing an album a day since 2021 has started, and I've been compiling a playlist just like from songs that like if I didn't like them already on my Spotify library, I've been liking them if I wanted to add them to my library and putting them all into one big playlist just to have. And out of the 15 songs on that album, I think I added 10 to that playlist. I I
From Machine Gun
never in a
Kelly.
million yes, never in a million years did I think that I would have liked that album, but I'm happy I
Interesting.
finally listened to it. You should check it out. It's
I'll
here's one
I'll check it out. Yeah.
definitely a different vibe. I mean, not something I typically would listen to, but I'm happy I did.
Yeah.
And
And how long
that's
has he
that.
been around? Like, has he been around for like what? At least
Let me
5 years. I don't even know. Like, I don't know anything about him. I feel he's been around for a while, at
so
least since like we were freshmen in high school, right?
so what I'm seeing right here on Spotify is his first album came out in 2012.
Okay. So eight
So
years, yeah. So
yeah, give or take. So very interesting. So this episode was I we went a lot of different ways this episode, but the big theme of this episode I would say was experimentation and change. I think that's a good way to put it. Just watching
yeah.
the two artists we specifically talked about kind of evolving and adapting with the times. So I don't know what we're gonna do next week, but until
Yeah,
next
I have
time,
no
thank
clue.
you
Like
again
you
for
I
yeah.
usually don't know which albums I want to do until like 3 days
It
until
just
we
depends.
want to
Yeah, I
record. Yeah,
know. It
it's
just kind of depends what mood I'm in, but we will we'll figure it out. And once again, guys, if you can spread the word to anyone who you think would enjoy the show, share us on your social media,
yeah. Be
subscribe to the
sure to
YouTube
like,
page.
subscribe, everything. We definitely want to keep doing this. We'll find out what we're doing next week in a few short days. It's usually my instinct at last minute when I'm like really digging at like on a Thursday or something. So
Yeah.
we will see.
All right. So until next time, signing off. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.